What would you do if you were 7 times world champion and discover that someone inside your own team has sabotaged your car? An internal conspiracy? Or simply a technical error? Today we reveal one of the darkest secrets Ferrari has lived in recent years. The Zandvoort circuit, wrapped by the dunes of the North Sea, witnessed one of the most disconcerting and tense moments in the 2025 season of Formula One. While the spotlights pointed to the battle for the pole and the stands vibrated to the rhythm of the engines, something much deeper was cooked inside the Ferrari box. Lewis Hamilton, in just his 3rd career as a pilot of the rampant Cavallino, was facing a situation that exceeded any expectation or previous experience. From the beginning of the weekend, Hamilton had shown signs of frustration that contrasted with the cold and calculator image that usually projects. On Friday, during free practices, the SF25 felt stable, predictable, with a behavior that was not yet perfect but within expected. However, when climbing on Saturday morning, what he found was a radically different car. The curve balance had deteriorated without explanation, the braking became more unpredictable, and the car did not react like 24 hours before. We are not talking about a subjective difference or a simple change in track conditions. Hamilton is not based only on sensations but on data. His meticulous style has led him to develop an obsession with telemetry, and it was precisely where he found the first clues of the problem. He compared the complete records of Friday and Saturday line per line, and discovered millimeter alterations that, for the inexperienced eye, might seem insignificant, but that in Formula One represents a world of difference. The most worrying variation was in the preload of the rear differential, a critical part of the car that controls how the torque is distributed to the rear wheels. If it is modified, even in a small fraction, you can completely change car behavior in traction, especially in low and medium speed curves. That modification was not reported in technical briefing. No one argued it. No one authorized her. But I was there. In addition, he also noticed adjustments in the brake balance, the rear suspension response, and even on power delivery maps. Each of these changes, separately, can be manageable. But together, without prior notice and without control of the pilot, they are equivalent to sabotaging their trust, their adaptation to the car and its classification strategy. In a sport where every 10th of the second is an eternity, this is unacceptable. The question soon settled in his mind: who had modified his car? And why? The finding shook Hamilton. He is not a rookie, nor a pilot who can easily be manipulated. The Central Performance Group, unintentionally or perhaps yes, had become a political actor. And in Zandvoort, with the unauthorized modifications in Hamilton's car, a pressure cooker was uncovered that could no longer be closed again. The questions were no longer only techniques. They were strategic, human, and cultural. Can Ferrari manage to leadership? Can you maintain your technical team cohesion when there is a cell operating without control? The drop that filled the glass arrived in Zandvoort. It was not just a matter of technical pride. It was a rupture of the chain. In a team of Formula One, especially one like Ferrari, each decision on the car must follow a clear hierarchy, from the track engineers through those responsible until they reach the team director. Skilling that flow is not a simple error. It is a betrayal of the system. Vasseur brought together his technical team behind the walls of hospitality in the circuit, away from the cameras and microphones, and made it clear: any intervention on cars that does not pass through him or by the responsible engineers will be considered a serious fault. But the damage was already done. The news of the conflict leaked in a matter of hours. And although he publicly tried to subtract importance, his body language and his evasive responses at the Saturday conference showed a contained irritation. Internally, the fracture could no longer be ignored. There were clear divisions within the team. Some engineers, particularly the most veteran, aligned with the old work paradigm. Decentralized technical decisions with broad margin for the interpretation of data and free execution by development cells. Others, more related to Vasseur and its most hierarchical and controlled style, demanded urgent reorganization. And in the midst of all this, there were the pilots. Leclerc, on the other hand, remained on the sidelines, but his silence was interpreted as a tacit support to the system that had formed him as a Ferrari pilot. Hamilton, on the other hand, demanded a complete review of the decision flow, a more direct integration with its technical group, and above all, guarantees that the pilot car will not be altered without its consent. Vasseur was on stage that no team leader wants. He had to choose between protecting the traditional Ferrari legacy or completely restructuring internal culture to adapt it to a more professional, modern, and pilot-centered vision. Any poorly calculated movement could cost him the position, but not doing anything would still have worse consequences. Hamilton's loss of confidence, the media exposure of the conflict, and the possible destabilization of the entire 2025 project. While the media talked about pole, the fight between McLaren and Red Bull, within Ferrari a cold war was fought. A silent but devastating power struggle. Vasseur's fury was not just because of that weekend. It was because it had been evidenced that the team still drags vices from the past, practices of yesteryear that are incompatible with the level of excellence required by Formula One modern. Ferrari's internal fracture is now undeniable. And if it does not act firmly, it could cost not only championships, but also the permanence of one of the most influential pilots in the recent history of motor racing. Do you want me to continue expanding the last act? The Zandvoort incident cannot be treated as a simple bump in the Ferrari road. It is a turning point that can have consequences of great draft for the rest of the season and even for the immediate future of the team. What has happened not only affects the performance of a car in a private weekend, but also puts into play something much more delicate: technical integrity, internal cohesion, and credibility of a project that promised to return Ferrari to the top. For Lewis Hamilton, the psychological and professional impact of this experience should not be underestimated. After their departure from Mercedes, many saw their arrival in Maranello as the final chapter of a legendary career, with the illusion of making history by becoming the first pilot to win championships with 3 different teams in the modern era. But to achieve that, Hamilton needs an environment in which he can trust. And what happened in the GP of the Netherlands has severely undermined that trust. That it's no longer about whether the car is fast enough. This is whether the team is working aligned with their vision, if their engineers really support it, and if each technical decision is being taken to maximize its performance, and not as a result of internal or dynamics of invisible power. If Ferrari fails to restore that connection with his star pilot, he runs the risk of activating one of the Hamilton contract performance clauses, which according to sources close to paddock, would allow him to break the link before the end of the season under certain conditions. But beyond the contractual plane, there is an equally dangerous consequence: the loss of motivation. A pilot like Hamilton, who has won everything, does not run by points or appearances. Run to win. And if he perceives that the team is not completely committed to that goal, their approach and delivery can deteriorate, affecting not only their own performance, but that of the entire surrounding environment. In parallel, the Ferrari address faces a scenario of maximum demand. Fred Vasseur is obliged to take concrete measures, not only to calm the tension with Hamilton, but to avoid a civil war within the team. If the technical cell known as the Central Performance Group continues to operate with autonomy and without accountability, there is a risk that similar situations are repeated, generating a domain effect that also compromises the performance of Charles Leclerc or other key elements of the team. Internal restructuring is no longer an option, it is an urgent need. Ferrari must redefine your decision flow, establish clear control mechanisms, and above all, restore confidence between pilots and their engineers. That implies a redesign of the technical organization chart, a new internal communication policy, and possibly the exit of certain elements that have crossed unacceptable lines. But the consequences are not limited to Maranello's walls. This scandal also resonates in the rest of the paddock. Rival teams such as McLaren and Mercedes observe carefully, aware that Ferrari's internal fracture could open a strategic window to attack in the championship. Red Bull, in full restructuring after the degradation of Liam Lawson and the rise of Tsunoda, also sees in this crisis an opportunity to return to the forehead if they manage to resolve their own conflicts. And then there is the FIA. Although it has not issued an official statement, the technical intervention in the Hamilton car without its knowledge could become reviewed by the governing body, especially if it is demonstrated that there was breach in the security protocols or manipulation of parameters that require explicit authorization. What happened in Zandvoort marks the beginning of a turbulent chapter for Ferrari. A chapter that, if not managed with firmness and transparency, could lead to a sports, institutional, and media collapse. Because in Formula One, victories are built from the unit. And today, Ferrari has shown that his greatest rival may not be in another garage, but within his own team. And at this point, the big question we must ask ourselves is not what happened. We already know. The real question is, what will Ferrari do now? Will you be able to look in, admit errors, make difficult decisions, and rebuild lost trust? Or, on the contrary, will you choose silence, denial, and repetition of the same patterns that have kept it away from the title for more than a decade? For Hamilton, the road is full of uncertainties. It has talent, experience, and intelligence to win. But he needs an environment that supports him, not to know him. Will you seek to shield a deep review of the internal system? Or will a point come where you decide that this project, however exciting, simply is not up to its ambition? What do you think of all this? Do you think it was really an internal conspiracy against Hamilton? Or was it simply a chain of poorly managed technical errors? Can Ferrari recover credibility after such a scandal? Should Hamilton consider alternatives if the situation does not improve? I want to read you in the comments.